we were very fortunate to, at our all-county band several years ago, to have David Holsinger come in. And David came in and was a phenomenal person. And David's just great. He's like the grandfather everybody wants. And so we finished up on a Saturday afternoon, and we took him to lunch before I took him to lunch before his flight, and it started snowing. And, which is okay. It's a little snow. It's not bad. And so as we sat in lunch, it got a little heavier. So we got him to the airport and, said our goodbyes, and I came on home. Well, as I was apt and still apt to do, I had a drink or two after, hosting an all-county weekend. And I get this call about 9 o'clock from his wife. Says, hey, David's plane's stranded, and is there any way you could go pick him up? So at this point, I'm like, I probably shouldn't be driving, especially national composer David Holsinger, with having a few drinks. So I said to my youngest son, Drew, come on, let's go. So Drew had never driven in snow before.
Sorry, Blair.
So we're headed down. He's doing his 30 miles an hour, keeping up with traffic, and it snows. It's pretty bad. So we get to the airport, we get David, we bring him back. So the story is now that now I have the Holsinger bedroom, and there's a little plaque, and so you can sleep in that bedroom for $150 a night.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 14. My guest for this episode is Blair Smith. Before we begin, I need to ask a favor. If you enjoy this podcast, would you please take a moment and go to iTunes and leave me a rating? This will help spread the word and bring the show to more listeners. I'm honored and delighted that you are listening to my podcast. If you find value from the show and want to help me with hosting costs, I've just launched a Patreon page. Patreon is an online service that allows people to support creators in their work. You can find mine at patreon.com/Mark J. Connor. Now on to the episode. Good morning, Blair.
Morning, Mark.
How are you today?
I am wonderful. It's Friday.
It is indeed. And so I'd like you to introduce yourself and let people know why you're on the podcast and what you're doing now.
Sure. My first career was I spent 30 years in public education here in North Carolina. I started out in my education career in Mechanicsville, Virginia, which is just a little north of Richmond. Went to high school at Lee Davis High School, and then went to East Carolina, go Pirates, for my undergraduate, and then moved to Roanoke Rapids Graded School District, just north of Rocky Mount, almost in Virginia, for those of you keeping up with geography. And I was there for 5 years and did elementary school and then middle school. And then I moved to Central Cabarrus High School, which is in Concord, North Carolina. Was there for 10 years, and then finished my career last year at Robinson High School, which is also in Concord.
So I first met you a few years ago. You were doing my piece Variations on a Russian Hymn.
Yeah, I remember that was new to our MPA or festival list, and I was a big champion of new music, so I listened to it, and then I said, this would really fit my band, and I love the Salvation is Created was the theme material, and I just emailed you, and we've started talking, and the rest, they say, is history.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on. To me, you're the perfect guest for the podcast. You're someone who was doing this and in the trenches for years, had lots of success, and so hopefully we can have a nice conversation about your career and maybe what you're doing now.
Well, great. Well, that's one thing I can do is talk for days, so cut me off when you need me to stop.
All right, can you tell me, what's your instrument, Blair?
I am a percussionist. Well, actually, I'm more of a drummer, but that's what I majored in.
Okay, and so now, how did you come to play percussion? What was that like when you were a kid? What was the moment where you decided to do this?
I was typically that typical drum, beating on everything, pots and pans. My mom's got pictures of me beating on the pans in the kitchen. And then when I got to elementary school, get ready to start the band, the band director, Bob Ellithorpe, actually wanted me to play trombone. And so I came home and said, Mom, I'm going to play trombone. And she said, no, you got this snare drum here that we bought for you. You playing drums. I'm like, okay. So she called and got that changed, and that was it. And I did that all the way through elementary school, or the the fifth grade band, and then middle school, back then it was junior high and high school, and then college at East Carolina as a percussion major. Well, music ed major, but with percussion as my, expertise, I guess.
And what was your high school band experience like? What made you want to become a teacher?
Well, I can give you the two moments that made me become a teacher. One was I was very fortunate to have the same band director junior high and high school. So for 5 years, I learned from him, and he's David L. Hoggard from up in Richmond, old jazz drum set player and vibe player. And he sat around the band room one day, and he was playing vibes. And one of his friends from what we call down the country came in, and they just were just sitting there and just improvising on jazz. And he was playing vibes. The other guy was playing piano. And I'm like, that is really cool. I wish I could do that. And so I started looking into it. And up to this point, I was going to be a pharmacist. So, and anybody that knows me now just laughs when I tell that story. And then my senior year, it was January 30th up at Stafford, Virginia. I was in the all-region band. And I was playing timpani, playing the finale to Mahler 3, arranged by Reynolds. And there were just two notes, the 1, 5, 1, 5. And we were at rehearsal on the stage, and something just struck me. Just like, this is the most incredible thing in the world. I have to do this the rest of my life. Came home, told my parents, set them back a little bit. And then went to my guidance counselor. I said, where are the two schools? Where do I need to apply? And I applied at James Madison. Didn't get in, and then applied to East Carolina and got in on a probation, and just fell in love with it.
That's a good story. I'm struck by that last comment, Blair, that you got in on probation.
I was never a great performer. I didn't learn how to read music necessarily, A, B, C, D really well until I decided to take music as a career and as a senior, and I took piano lessons. That was the first time I really. And so I've struggled, even today, I struggle with music reading just because it wasn't ingrained. I was back with the old school. Okay, you're a drummer, you play drums, you snare drum, bass drum, occasional timpani, and we'll let somebody else play the mallet instruments. So I struggled in college. I was never ever going to be a performer. That was never. I even told my private teacher, it's like, look, I can't practice 3 hours a day. I'm working on my ed degrees and learning how to teach flute and strings and everything. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you mind me asking, but I teach college level music theory, and how was that for you? How was the academic part, the theory part, especially if the reading was weak?
Theory kind of eluded me. I did what I could. I studied what I could, but it was just a struggle. And then there was the ear training and sight singing, and oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because I often or have had students that struggle in theory, but then go on to great careers. And, you had a 30-year career as a teacher with lots of success.
Yeah. You find ways around your limitations.
Absolutely. And, I think that's a really important lesson here.
And you do that once you get out with your groups, your flute section is weak. So now we don't feature that flute section. We find something that will hide them and bring out everything else. So I guess in that respect, my shortcomings kind of helped me in a career where I didn't always have phenomenal instrumentation or strong players in every section, just like every band director does.
So now, did you do a lot of arranging when you were first teaching or during your career?
No, I have never, ever arranged for the winds. As a percussionist, I did drum lines for years. That was my summer work, marching drum. And I'm a marching band guy from day one. And that's what got me hooked into marching bands and watching drum corps on TV back in the 80s, and 70s, late 70s. So I would do drum lines in this fall and summer, and I would do arrangements of songs for that. But as far as wind, I never had to do that. And back then, arranging for the front ensemble was just the bells play the flute part and xylophone plays the maybe the clarinet part. So that was about it.
Because I often tell that to my students is that if you're going to be a teacher, you have to have some arranging skills, but clearly that's false information.
Well, and I was very fortunate, especially in the marching band area where you're going to, have to do most arranging. Every program I walked into had an arranger for the marching band.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so when I took over my own program, I right off the bat, we had Robert Smith writing our book, Larry Clark writing our book, Nick Barata wrote our book. So some great people that I just said, okay, yeah, here's the check.
Well, yeah. Well, you're just going to strength.
Exactly. I mean, my job was when I took over at Central Cabarrus in '91 when they had been, Grand National finalists several years. And so as a new high school director, my job one was keep the staff happy and allow them to do what they did for our students and for the program.
What was that like to kind of come into a program that had a lot of success and you were the new guy?
Well, luckily I was a lot younger and a lot more stupid back then. So I just went in and just worked just as hard as I could. I was able to bring in another friend of mine for that first year that kind of assisted me and had done some other work. Jay Watkins, who's actually now at University of Florida. And he came in and was assistant director with me, and we kind of tag teamed and got the band, working so that it didn't lose anything when we got there. We tried to kind of keep pushing the musical aspects and not just the visual aspects.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's just hard work.
Sure. So now, when did you move to Concord, to J. Robinson?
Yeah, well, 91 was when we moved from up in Roanoke Rapids, and then was there for 10 years.
Okay.
And then I moved to Robinson and opened the school in 2001. So.
Okay, I see.
Main reason I left was some administration problems, but the ability to open a new school was always something I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's exciting because you have complete control and every decision from the beginning.
Right. And I met the principal. I remember meeting him. I met him in a trailer behind the central office where we were doing interviews. And I still remember that interview like it was nothing. Oh, like it was yesterday. And he's a great principal. One of the best ones I've had. And actually, we ended up naming the auditorium after him.
Can you tell me a little bit about North Carolina and music ed there? It's one of the great music ed states.
There are probably now, I'm not going to leave somebody out, but the larger universities, are East Carolina, I had to start with them. And they've got, Western Carolina, you've got UNC Charlotte, you've got UNC Greensboro, you've got UNC Chapel Hill. Those are the big schools, in the state as far as, colleges. And coming from Richmond, I just like that North Carolina is a little slower than Virginia, but a lot of the groups are just as capable of the Virginia. You hear the Northern Virginia as kind of like one of the meccas of the area, and they have some phenomenal bands. And I think North Carolina has some great bands too, but just the pace is just a little slower. Yeah,
I think North Carolina is a great state for high school band and marching band. I have some cousins who were in Raleigh, who you met actually.
Oh yes. Yeah, that was small world kind of thing.
That was a very funny moment when that happened.
Yeah, I still remember. I still got those pictures on my phone of all of your family that I was sitting there with.
It is a small world, the music world, indeed.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into some conducting advice and some teaching advice. So let's say that I handed you a new piece of music and I said, you had to learn this in 2 weeks and you had to present it at a festival or at a concert. What would be your first steps?
And, lots of things. First of all, what age group is it for? Is it for one of the younger bands? Is it for a college level group? So, so there's some variables there. And then is that the only piece we're working on, or is it something, within a group or things like that? But let's just say it's the only piece for like maybe the top high school group. So I think you have to start with, I always start just try to read it down. Just from the beginning, just go in, read it down. Don't maybe tell the kids a little bit about it, but if it's a somewhat programmatic piece, I usually save that story till a little later, just so that they have some idea of what it is. So we would play through it once, and then most of the time after that, you can tell whether a piece is going to work with the group or not, or how much outside rehearsal you need to have, or but by that point, because if you can't get about 60 to 70% the first time through, the piece is probably too hard for you. At least that's what I've always found out.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, you can go back and if that's the only piece you're working on, I would probably make some sort of rhythm sheet. I'm a huge believer in rhythmic accuracy and the ability to read things as you go, because most of the times folks aren't asking, what's the name of the note. They're asking what is the rhythm when something goes. So that was a huge, and me being a percussionist, that was kind of always, there has to be some counting system associated with everything. Even, the only thing I couldn't find a way to do is 16th note triplets. I couldn't figure out a way to count those, but everything else I was counting with some sort of syllable. And then, after that, then, the next day they'll come back and hopefully have practiced a little bit. Well, probably about 10 of the 50 would have practiced it a little bit. So, you're basically going to be teaching during we had an hour and a half class period. And then, once they get under their fingers a little bit and we've found the problem places, you just go back with the rhythm sheets to make sure you know that. And then you start looking actually at the piece, the arch of the piece, is it lyrical? Is it, ABA form or whatever? And then just continue to, minute, go from forest down to trees. And then hopefully, while you're doing that, you can also put the forest back into it as you go.
Sure. And so you do lots of guest conducting these days, correct?
Yeah, I've had my share.
All right. So that's sort of like that honor band. I guess that's probably how I should phrase that question, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because, first of all, you got to know the ability of the group, obviously. You try to contact the previous conductors and say, hey, was this group, did you over-program? Did you under-program?
Get a sense, yeah.
Are they mainly seniors? Is it a audition group? Is it just a selected group? So a lot of variables, where at your own high school band, exactly where the pitfalls are. And you're not going to pick that piece that, needs 27 percussionists and you've got a snare drummer and a bass drummer who can't count.
Yeah. So how did you pick music? I think that's one of the questions that for me as a band director, and I say this in almost every podcast, really vexed me, trying to sort through all the music.
And it changed a lot over my 30 years. Well, my first 5 years, I didn't really pick a lot of harder music. I picked middle school music, which is nothing the matter with middle school music, but you're limited, obviously. As I got my first 10 years at San Francisco, I was trying to play the hardest things that the kids could play, pushing them. And sometimes they achieved that. Sometimes they didn't. But, it was as much for ego as anything else, and then as my second half of my career, I just started picking stuff that my wife would listen to in the audience because she was one of my biggest critics. I'd have a 2-hour concert, and she's like, that's just too long. So I would just, cut it down to now an hour concert twice, and pick things that she would like or things that I would like.
Yeah. So is your wife kind of your ideal listener?
Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
She's my most, opinionated listener. How about that?
Yeah, I guess because I just read a book on creativity, the On Writing by Stephen King.
Okay.
And he talks about when he writes a novel, how he writes the first draft with the door closed where no one gets to look at it. But then the second draft he shows to his wife, who in his mind is his ideal reader. And
right.
then she gives him comments. And so I'm interested because, I think as a composer or as a conductor or as anyone who's creating, you're thinking about what you're trying to give to the audience. And you must have something in your mind. And so that's interesting that you brought that up.
It also depends on the time of the year and everything. We were still able to do seasonal concerts, so that those things have their own set of events or dealings you want to do with the audience. And my wife's a course teacher, and so she's really good about just kind of just say that concert was too long, or I really like that piece that worked well with that, and then you just put that in the back of your brains for future reference. But I always try to, or at least my last half of the career, really tried to think of the audience members, because you have to give them variety. You can't do all Hindemith all the time in a public school setting. At least I don't think, especially where I am, and have the audience stay with you all the time.
Yeah, sure. You have to pick your spots.
Right.
So I know that you've had composers in a work with your group, and I know you've had Robert W. Smith. You commissioned a work from him. I was wondering if you could talk about in general, the experience of having composers work with the students, and then more specifically, maybe that commission.
Sure. I was looking back through, actually just looked back through my bio, and it's like, I've probably commissioned or been in commission probably 15 to 20 pieces over the past 30 years.
Wow.
Which started with, when I was, up in Roanoke Rapids, we commissioned Jim Kernow to do a tuba concerto with David Mills and his tuba player in the North Carolina Symphony. And just, it was just an incredible, and we had Jim come up and work with the group, and that just really intrigued me. And then since then, I'll commission, anything I can commission. I've commissioned percussion ensemble pieces, brass ensemble pieces, several pieces every time I do a clinic, I try to commission somebody to do a new piece, whether it be just a fanfare, a new edition of March or something, just to try to give the kids, that experience. Because I just think that's incredible. I wish I would have had that when I was.
Yeah. So do you have any notable stories or notable experiences from those without embarrassing anyone?
Right. I had several, and most of it just comes from, hey, I heard a piece that I liked, just like with you. I heard a piece I liked of your music, and I contacted you. I would call, or through some of my other, like Larry Clark would do my marching band. So we had 2 students that were killed in car accidents. So I had him commission a piece to honor their memory. And that piece never got published, but it was still something that those students really, it helped them, I think, heal. We had Sean O'Laughlin up. I used to do a composer series that would play a whole concert of their pieces. I've done several of those, but funny story about Sean. Sean came in and in my really small office, we had one little closet, and my oldest son was in the middle school band at that point. And he was there we would combine the 2 middle school bands and then Sean would conduct his music, then the concert band, which is my freshman band, and then my older band. So do a night of Sean O'Laughlin music. And so they both put their wardrobe in the closet behind my desk, and my oldest son, Aaron, came in, grabbed a pair of pants, changed, went on. Sean came in, grabbed a pair of pants and went to the dressing room, and he texted me, he goes, "Blair, my pants don't fit." So I'm scrambling around, trying to find, and then it dawns on me, wait a second, Aaron has his pants. So I came with Aaron. Aaron, he goes, yeah, they're a little big. I'm like, all right, yeah, go take those off, and we need to switch stuff. So my son wore Sean O'Loughlin's pants. And then, but every composer I've had to come in, and I was very fortunate my last 15 years to host the all-county band, and we commissioned a piece every 2 years. And just the people that you, once you start talking to them, working with them, I have not had a bad experience with any composer that I can think of that has worked with the group. They've all been great, and they're all real people. Mm-hmm. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Composers are real people. They usually have day jobs. They have families. They have to walk the dog at night. They're real people. Yeah. They just are good at what they do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we are real people. I think, I mentioned this. I say things a lot all the time in this podcast. But, when I was a band director and I was first starting, I was 25, 26. I was scared of composers, and I had a composition degree, and so I still had sort of that hero worship thing going on a little bit, even though I was sort of supposedly one myself. And so it took me a long time, and even to this day, I still get a little bit starstruck, and these are people that I know, and
mm-hmm.
They influenced me, and that makes it a little hard sometimes to approach people.
And as you get older and the composers get younger, that helps a little bit.
This is true.
And I think part of this also is that you go to things like Midwest Clinic and you see people, oh, this piece was commissioned for them. It's like, well, I may be able to find some money to do that. That was one thing I always did in my marching bands. Whatever we spent on a wind, like the wind staff instruction, I would always spend on the fall or in the winter the same amount, which was kind of unheard of here because it was always marching band money, and then you didn't really spend money on the indoor groups. But and with that money, I would bring in people, because most folks, well, back then, $1,000 plus airfare, and a lot of them, if you bring them in, they won't charge you for the clinic sometimes. Now it is a business, but for $1,500, $2,000, you could bring a composer in to work with your kids. Right. And then once you get to commissioning, $2,000, so we're going to $5,000 to commission a piece for, maybe not Lincolnshire Posey, but as far as length goes, but, something that the kids can have an experience working with a living composer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important as a composer and as a former teacher.
If an English teacher could bring in a famous author or even a coach could bring in a coach, folks would that would be all over the papers, and so we usually with band booster money, you have a little more flexibility. You can do that and give your students just that incredible experience that not a lot of people get.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Midwest. It's really important to go up there as a teacher when you can.
It's important to get to your local, district level, and even to other clinics. Because in retirement, I've gone to several other state conventions in my new capacity. But and just get out there and just listen to what's going on and meet other people, so that the same people don't start doing, the same area. So if one person comes in, we'll have I don't know about every place else, but used to have meetings in our districts where, okay, who do we want to nominate to do our all county band or our all district band or our all state band? And they're always the same people. And so you've got to get out there and find other people. There's some incredibly talented people that may not have a national name, but if you get out there and see their bands or go to a clinic they do, they're there. And then you just walk up to them, at some place else, usually at the bar, and say, I really enjoyed your clinic yesterday. Can you come work my kids? Or, and so that's how most of my, people started.
Sure. So what was your favorite state convention other than North Carolina?
Texas. I've been to TBA and TMEA this year. Unfortunately, I have not been able to get to any concerts or clinics because I've been in the booth. I've gone into a sales position now. But just the people that are there, and even at Midwest, walking through the exhibits. Hey, isn't that, you've got your neck on a swivel trying to find people, didn't we just pass, so that's, and 9 times out of 10, if you talk to them, they're very sincere in the fact that they appreciate somebody saying, hey, I liked your music. Can I email you now, or can we Skype, or, can you do that? And we had you into Skype, and that worked great. That worked great, so. It's just you've got to get out. You can't stay in your hole. You've got to get out of the office.
Yeah, the band world's so friendly too. There's very few people I've met in the band world that I wouldn't want to have a beer with or.
Exactly. And they're all in it for the same reason. You hear these different parts of the country, the directors are so different, but they're not. They honestly love what they do. They think their program is special, which it is, and they want to tell you about it. Which that's human nature. That's everywhere. I don't care whether you're in this, a band of 20 or a band of 350. Everybody's the same into what they want for their kids.
Yeah. So it sounds like in your career, this idea of networking and building relationships has been central.
It really has. And it started through the marching world. Through the folks we talked about earlier, and then looking at their concert work and them saying, well, who do you like? And the other thing is just who the music that I like. I tend to be more percussive in nature or very romantic. So I love the slower pieces. If I could do a whole slow concert, I would. But my wife would kind of walk out. So, it goes back to that. So it's just really, what you like. And then the composers, especially nowadays, you hear something and then you see, you talk to them or email them and say, hey, do you have anything else that's similar or different? Because I know a lot of times composers get put into that category of all writing the same music. Well, if we wouldn't keep buying the same music, you probably would stop writing the same music.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, that comment? Because that's come up a lot in recent interviews.
I'm surprised there's still a publishing industry because the more people I talk to, it's all going to self-publishing. Even to the point where now publishers are not producing new music. They're going back and redoing some things. And it's getting harder and harder to have something published. And I guess, it's not as big of a deal, I don't think now, to have it at a publisher as it is just to get it out on the internet, Facebook, whatever. Because back when the publishers, when I was sorry, I hate to say that. Back when I was doing this, you waited for those square records to come out that you had to pull out of the books. And that's the only way you could hear music. But now you can, it's just so much easier to find great music out there.
Yeah, it's the self-publishing route is certainly something that is becoming more common. I find it, for me, there are a few composers who are really doing the self-publishing thing really well. John Mackey, Stephen Bryant. We know these names. But I think to break in, for my my experience, I liked being with a publisher, and I like being with a publisher because they do still have a very long reach.
Oh, and I think they do some phenomenal work as far as, publishing, not publishing, but pushing the product out there, making sure that it gets in the band director's hands, or chorus or strings, whatever. But it's just, it's coming more and more that people can self-publish and be successful at it.
Oh, no question, no question. And that's ultimately the model we're going to. I mean, it's going to take years to evolve, but I think there are a few people out there who are prescient with this and are sort of looking ahead. And I think a shared model or a consortium model, these are things that are going to develop.
Right. Well, I've been in consortiums with both John and Stephen for premieres, or so that's a great way to be. You spend $200 to $500 and can get your name on a premiere, and also bring new works to our art form.
Yeah, Stephen's relatively local to you.
Yeah, he's up in Durham.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had him down, and let's see, the Machine Awakes was one of the ones that we commissioned, that we were in the consortium to commission.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what hard-earned lessons would you share with let's say a first or a second, third-year teacher?
Well, and there are several in our area that basically, I'm the old guy now, but we've several new directors, and first thing I do is as soon as they get the job, I call them and say, hey, look, whatever you need, call me. Because I was fortunate to have a mentor, and that I don't know that a lot of great band directors that didn't have mentors.
Yeah.
And I think just when you start, I was actually watching The Karate Kid for the umpteenth time this weekend, and Mr. Miyagi talks about balance, and I think that's the biggest thing. They have to find balance because it is so easy in this profession just to have it absorb you. I was one of those. I did it for 15 years. It defined who I was. Just finding that balance in the program itself and also in your life. There's got to be times you step away from it, which I wish I would have known. That was one of those things. 20 years ago would have been nice to know. But and then just ask questions, because there's one band director usually in North Carolina. There's usually one band director in a school, if that many. And so just ask people near you. That's the biggest thing, because somebody has gone through what you're going through somewhere. Even on Facebook, there's a director's forum that works out. There are lots of those. They're great. Yeah,
in a way, it's kind of why I start this podcast. Can you tell me about digital performance gear?
Sure. Well, when I retired, I was state of North Carolina. One of the things they do wonderfully is they give you a retirement, or at least back when I started, they give you a retirement package, but it's not what you need to live on. Well, if your wife's a teacher and you're both drawing retirement, it's not what you need to live on. So, I have to keep working. So I was very fortunate to come in with at Digital Performance Gear, which is located here in Concord. And we are basically a marching band apparel business to begin with. We also do screen printing, embroidery, but we've come up with a uniform that seems like the marching band world is going to more show-based uniforms. And if you watched any drum corps last summer, the Oregon Crusaders, they were wearing our uniforms. They were kind of the first national group, and they basically look like trees. They wanted to look like a forest, and so we designed a uniform to look like trees. And we've been very successful over in the Winter Guard, Winter Drumline, Winter Winds area, and they're relatively affordable. This is not a plug for us, but we're not spending $350 on a uniform. Of course, our uniforms probably won't last 10 years either, but if you're going to change every year, you can get a new top, for instance, for $68. And a lot of bands have just asked the students to purchase those, and then they just keep them, and you don't have to deal with them. So, but we found that they're a lighter weight kind of performance material that it's easier to move into, especially now, because now it's not just marching band. Now it's movement. You can't just march left, right the whole show and be successful. In the larger areas. So, and the other good thing is the boss and the owner is one of my former students.
Have you found that your network of relationships that you built as a band director helping you with this job?
Yes and no. Yes, in that, especially here locally, obviously, if I call somebody, or they know that what I'm doing now, they'll call me and say, Blair, and I've got that connection relationship. We do a lot of stuff across the country. I mean, Texas, Florida, the Midwest, California. So a lot of those folks, don't know me, but at least, well, I think what I bring to that is that, I've been on the other end of the phone calling and saying, hey, look, I need flags. Okay. And now I'm the voice on the other end. So I know exactly what they're thinking. And now I've got to make sure that happens from the production standpoint, which is a different dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Blair. So I'm going to ask you my final questions here in a moment, but anyone who follows you on social media knows that you're an avid golfer.
Well, avid, yes. Good, no.
Well, that's okay. How many rounds a week? Inquiring minds want to know.
If I can get out once a week, that's kind of what if I get out once a week, I'm happy. It's funny because that is I just started playing about 10 years ago, so I haven't played all my life, and I just kind of started with my sons down at the beach and up on a little par 3. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. So and being the type A personality I am, as soon as you do that, it's all in. So I've taken lessons. I was actually this morning, I just finished a half-hour lesson. But it's so similar to learning a musical instrument. And the parallels are incredible. And everybody said, you can't do it on your own. You got to take lessons. So I found a local golf pro and started with him. And, just like in band, the kids are trying not to stink. I'm trying not to slice that ball, but there's things that you have to know and people to show you that. And so the parallels are incredible.
There are a lot of parallels.
And I used to hate getting outside. I used to hate it. Marching band up on the tower, I used to hate that. But now I don't mind if I'm on the golf course now.
Yeah, I just talked to Patrick Burns last week for an interview. And we were talking about that peak experience where you get that moment where something is so special in music that it makes you want to keep going. It makes all those hours of practice worth it.
Yes.
And how it's the same thing on a golf course. You could be terrible for 80 shots, and then your 81st shot could be the one where you stiff it close to the pin on the par 3, and suddenly you want to keep going.
Yeah.
All right, Blair. So what's your favorite work for wind ensemble?
I was thinking about that, and I don't know that I have a favorite, really kind of peak piece for, Lincolnshire Posey, those kind of things that, they, as a percussionist, Lincolnshire Posey did not really, strike me. When I first, as I got older, yes, it's a phenomenal piece of music, and I've performed it, a couple times, or at least movements of it. The two pieces that really just, if I could only listen to two pieces, one was the finale from Symphony Number 3, the Mahler, which that has personal, that's what got me into this mess, or this career. The other one is a piece called Entrada, Adoration and Praise by Claude T. Smith. Claude was, I guess for lack of a better word, the James Swearingen of his time, with being very prolific. And that's what I grew up on, Claude music. I was able to hear him once conduct that. And it's basically theme and variations, as most of his music was. But the end has an antiphonal brass moment. And I was at East Carolina one year for all district band. And I was sitting in the balcony between the brass section. And I didn't know what was coming. And they laid into that, and just my heart melted. And so those two pieces, if I only could pick two, I know they're not, very, what's the word I'm looking for, high eyebrow, but those two pieces are it for me.
I would say Mahler 3 is pretty highbrow.
Okay, well, yeah. but it's a transcription, so it's not really a band piece.
Well, we could talk about transcriptions. And did you do a lot of transcriptions as a teacher?
I did a lot more transcriptions when I was younger, but I love transcriptions. Well, my final MPA performance, along with your variations on the Russian theme, was also the Light Cavalry Overture, and so yeah, you just can't go wrong with a transcription.
When I was young, I remember my college band director, the music ed professor, telling us to do transcriptions because that was the only way the kids were going to get that music. Mm-hmm. And then as a young director, I didn't listen to that advice. I thought, well, gee, we have all this music we need to play now. And the older I get, the more I see the value in transcriptions. I've come around the circle a little bit.
Right. Now, there are some groups that play too many transcriptions, but
yeah, sure.
I would, anytime I can find, and there are some great arrangements of great easier arrangements of transcriptions. And I like to see composers coming back to them. especially some of the Japanese composers are coming back to more or doing different arrangements of transcriptions. I like to see those too.
Yeah, I have one that I want to do, but I'm not sure it's a Bartok piece. I'm not sure if he's in the public domain yet.
Yeah, there's the whole copyright, which wasn't a thing when we first started. Actually, funny story. Do we have a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So I was there when copyright became important to Bands of America.
Uh-huh.
We were up in the Midwest, and we were sitting there watching. I'm not going to say the band's name, but this was back in the early 80s, actually I lied, probably 90s. And a song came up on the screen. They were watching it at the corner, and the composer walked by and said, "Who's that?" And they looked at it, and he got on his phone. Just then, you could tell he was calling his attorney. The next year, Bands of America had in place the copyright, which it's a pain, but it's the only way that this is going to continue.
Well, composers, we need to eat.
Right, exactly. And that was always one of the lessons in band was we take one, especially if we do a pop song, it's like, okay, let's talk about copyright and why you downloading something from, the internet is illegal. Well, whatever. No. So I would spend a lot of time on that just because, it takes money out of your pocket.
It does. It's important too. It's just basic respect for what we do and for the profession and for the whole community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we all support each other. Composers support the teachers support the composers, and we're all in this together. Like we talked about earlier, everyone's friendly.
Right.
And part of that's because of the mutual respect that everyone has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we need to teach our kids that same lesson.
Right, because they may not all be producers of music, but they're all going to hopefully all be consumers.
Absolutely.
And so hopefully responsible consumers.
So Blair, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Oh, the first, there are three things. First of which would be in your career, find that balance, because you are going to want to, as the type A personality that I am, you're going to want to work constantly, with the pushing away all others, and that's not going to work. You're gonna have problems later in life, and some possibilities of some bad choices too. The second thing was in 1983, you're going to meet a girl named Linda Baker. Don't wait a year and a half to start dating her. And the third thing was June 20th, 2004, you're going to ask, I wonder if this tuna salad is good or not. The answer is it's not good. So that was a whole weekend that I wanted to talk about. So, but yeah, that's it. I mean, just be good. Just be good people.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
I'm playing golf next week. No. No, I mean, I'm available. The summer's a little bit slower for the company until July 1, where everybody's purchase order comes in. So now we're pushing through, and then it really has been eye-opening to be on the other side of the industry. I was always a consumer, and now having to be a producer, it really does open your eyes.
I know we're towards the end here, but in what way did it open your eyes?
We're a small business. We're growing. We've doubled in size in a year. But it's just there's so many small businesses around, not just in the band world, just that make our country run that I never really thought about. Like our office is in a large industrial park, and there are people next to us that are doing things, small businesses that sell things all over the world. And it just, I've never thought about that. It's always been here. I mean, I literally ride by my old school to get to work every day. And so, I just have never thought about this end of our economy.
Yeah. There's that old saying that we're all the star in our own movie. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't look around and see what's around us.
Well, that's for sure. That's the whole going back to that 20-year-old self,
Yeah. Yeah. How can people get in touch with you?
Two things. If you are looking for golf lessons or anything personal, it's ECU, East Carolina University, golfman@gmail.com. And then the business one is Blair@digitalperformancegear.com. And we've got a Facebook page and a website also, Digital Performance Gear.
All right, Blair, this was a great conversation.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate it. And I do want to just, if we can end with just a little story about you. my last performance in MPA, we were doing, like I said, the Light Cavalry Overture and then Your Variation on a Russian hymn. And we were playing the Light Cavalry last and for our pre-MPA concert, our pre-festival concert. And in between the time of that concert and the true final performance, I switched to pieces because I wanted to end with the crowd version you did at the end of that piece. And that moment will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I just want to thank you for creating that moment and sharing it with us.
Blair, that's incredible to me because, sometimes it's hard to believe as a composer that I actually write music and that people have that experience. It's really humbling, because as you say, we're all people, I don't think of it that way. And so that really means a lot to me.
Even so much that the next piece I did at All County Band was one that you wrote for the school where I started teaching. So
yeah, that's a funny coincidence that happened. North Carolina's been very good to me.
Well, and you've been very good to us too.
Well, I appreciate that. Blair, thanks so much.
Well, thanks, Mark, and I appreciate it. And if I can do anything for anybody, just give me an email.
I will.